Hello and good morning and welcome to a video from my balcony. So I I wanted to make it a little bit less formal because, frankly, I it's such a pain to edit each of those videos to like the good quality, and I know I haven't posted in a while. So today's video has to do with the topic with a question rather that I've been asked fairly recently. And that has to do with what's sort of the process to start looking for jobs outside of academia when you are finishing your PhD. Like how quickly, or rather how far away should you start planning that process? Should be 6 months before you graduate? Is this a year, or like what's sort of the best practices, if you will? So, to answer that question, I'll quickly tell a story of how my transition journey really occurred, like how far in advance I started applying for jobs and so on. And then I'll give you my, I guess, perspective and recommendation on what's maybe the best thing for you if you are contemplating, if you're nearing your graduation, and just sort of give you my perspective on what I could have done differently and what you can do as well. So before I go any further, please give me a like if you don't mind and subscribe to my channel. I know I'm not the best YouTuber out there, far from it to be honest, and I'm still trying to find the best way to deliver content that I think would be meaningful to my audience, and I'm actually still looking for the audience. So any and all help will be greatly appreciated. Thank you. So, the story of transition that I wanted to share for me really started way before I even started my PhD, because the company that I ultimately joined, that I'm working for right now, I first was aware of. Actually, before my PhD, I worked with their instruments before, but I didn't really think much of it. So you never know the, what position you're gonna end up taking eventually after you graduate. So uh, don't think like, oh, you're running out of time if you're like 6 months out and you still haven't figured out where to apply and so on. Maybe you already know exactly the company you're gonna work for, you just don't know it yet. So I started applying for, but majority of the positions about 4 or 5 months before my graduation, right after I passed my pre-thesis defense, which was it was around October 2019, and I graduated in February 2020. So there was a few months before I started applying, before I graduated, when I started applying for jobs. So I obviously had my resume prepared, and I knew all the good practices about it, such as tailoring it to specific job description, making sure to highlight transferable skills, actionable outcomes that you've achieved in each of the positions that you're going to list, and so on. So there's many tips for that. But 6 months out I think it's a really decent start to start applying for jobs. Uh, but if, let's say, if you don't know exact date of your graduation, um, let's say you're thinking, okay, maybe it's around 8 months out, but we haven't finalized the time. What to do then? Well, actually, I think a good tactic would be to start applying for jobs, but being transparent. Like, hey, I am graduating, let's say, in spring 2022. I don't have a date yet, but that's where I'm working hard towards, and I'm looking for a job in spring 2022. And you can use a potential job offer in your negotiation with your supervisor, PhD supervisor, to sort of make sure that as soon as you finish your PhD, you're gonna start the next job immediately, if that's kind of what you're aiming to do. I know for international students it's very important. Like for me, it was very, very important to land a job as soon as I graduated. Obviously, that didn't work exactly as I hoped because of the pandemic, but that's a different story. But if that's a concern that you want to start immediately after PhD, you can use that negotiating tactic. If you have a job lined up, you can then go for a conversation with your PI and say, hey, I just was in conversations with a company. They would like me to start around this time, and I know we talked about graduating around the same time frame. Do you think we can make it work for this particular date? So that's a ballsy tactic, to be fair. So that may not work for everybody, but I think it's a fair attempt to try and do. Um, but as far as what is a good timeline to start applying, is it a year out? Is it a 6 months? Well, actually, I think what's important in the timeline is it's not like you just blasting your resumes for like a straight 1 year period, because that's not what I'm actually recommending at all, and that's not what the good practices that I've heard of are talking about. What you should start doing about a year in advance is, in fact, combing through the network of connections that you have and actually identifying some of the places where you think you might want to work for, as well as some of the connections that you might have that already work in similar positions or in the companies that you might be interested in working for or in the places where you would like to work. So really doing the homework and identifying those leads, if you don't mind me using some business term. So identifying promising leads and narrowing down on a tentative job description that you sort of think you identify and relate to the most. So that kind of homework is very very important um, to be done as early as possible. So when the time comes to actually um, apply for those types of positions, you already have a more or less the resume that is more or less tailored to that kind of general job description, and you just need to do tweaks to specific job descriptions at particular companies. So, in addition, that's also a good time, about a year in advance, to talk to some people in your network or re-establish the connections or find new connections by going to networking events or attending them online, and try and set up informational interviews. Trust me, it sounds easier than it might actually be, because not all of us are extroverts or like talking to, to people. But if you want to transition outside of academia, talking to people on the phone or in person via coffee or whatever is very important. So growing those social skills, those transferable skills, by talking to other people, finding out what they like about their job, if that's kind of the job you're looking for, or what do they like, what do they like about the company that you might be interested in working for. So those kinds of questions are important to find out as early as possible, and that can be done without having a set PhD defense date. However, like at 6 months out mark or thereabouts, it's definitely a good idea to really ramp up that particular process, as well as really start identifying areas where you'd like to apply, the companies that you have to have like a sort of list of companies that you're interested in, or basically trying to set up more direct informational interviews that can lead to referrals. So to be fair, there's many great examples of strategies, like exact strategies, like what you should do. But I think those are the main highlights. I think starting 6 months out is perfectly okay, but having some foundations about a year in advance is also very important. So those would be my two recommendations. To be fair, again, you never know. At least I had not much knowledge of what my job outside of academia would look like, and it actually started way before my PhD in some shape or form. So think about what you experienced over the last several years, and whether or not you can identify some things that you are gravitating towards, and that might also help you drive this discovery process, as far as looking for connections or looking for potential places to work. So if you found this content helpful, please give it a like and subscribe to my YouTube channel. It will be really really helpful. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, bye bye.